Buonasera a tutti. Good evening and welcome to the Italian Radio Hour. Io sono Viviana and I would like to welcome back our regular listeners and also welcome any new listeners and everyone listening online at khbradio.com. Also, be sure to like us on Instagram and Facebook at Italian Radio Hour and subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch up on any past episodes. Vorrei dare il benvenuto ai nostri ascoltatori da tutto il mondo. Grazie per essere con noi anche oggi mentre continuiamo il nostro viaggio per l'Italia e la cultura italiana. This week marks the Week of Italian Cuisine in the World, and many organizations are gearing up to showcase the talent of world-renowned chefs all over the world. I'm very excited to have a very special guest with us today who, like no others, knows the best chefs of authentic regional Italian food. The creator of the highly successful Pasta Grannies phenomenon with nearly 2.5 million followers across YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Author of No One But Spoiler Alert, 2 Pasta Grannies cookbooks, and winner of the James Beard Award, Vicky Bennison. Ma prima, pubblicità. Do you want to learn, improve, or master your Italian? Istituto Mondo Italiano can help. Located in the heart of Regent Square, Mondo Italiano offers small group classes and one-on-one private tutoring to help you learn Italian in no time. Visit us online at www.istitutomondoitaliano.org. Well, the wait is finally over. I'm super excited to have with us our very famous, super acclaimed Vicky Bennison. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much indeed for inviting me.
Well, it looks like you've been on the road for like nearly 6 years with this project. Is your suitcase always ready?
I never unpack my cabin bag. It's always ready to go.
So, I mean, it looks like 6 years in a row, but I'm sure you take little breaks between filming and trying to go back home, go to Italy and so forth.
Absolutely. I've been doing it for about 9 years now. I'm amazed. I also would think it's 6 years, but in fact has been longer. The way that it works is that I will film every, say, 6 weeks or so. We'll go away for about 5 days filming. Any longer than that, then the team ends up in a carb coma. We're kind of delirious from all the pasta that we're eating. So we don't do long stretches of filming. We do it sort of little and often.
So I'm actually curious about a couple of things, the Vicky before Pasta Grannies. So can you tell us a little bit about what was your previous professional life focusing on? And did you have any connection whatsoever, or the Pasta Grannies, I don't want to say clean slate, but something completely different from what you were doing before?
Yes, it is very different, but I had a kind of a day job. I was a management consultant. I began my career with PwC, and then I did an MBA, and then I moved into aid work, international development, which I did for a couple of decades. And that involved things like going off to South Africa for 2 years. Always, wherever I visited a new area, a new region, I'd always start by going to the markets, because that's the best way to find out, the heart of the culture and what's happening and things. So I was writing alongside the consulting about food. And so eventually, I had a couple of guidebooks, and then I was co-author of Jose Pizarro's first book. So it wasn't until Pasta Grannies came along that I actually sort of shed the consulting, if you like, and move full time into the food world, food media.
And so back from, you said you would go to the market. What was your relation with food in general? Back home, is there such a great food culture, or were you raised with any traditions that you would like to share?
I was born in Kenya, and my dad worked with agricultural development. He trained farmers and he did research into crops. So we were in the middle of nowhere. So there was no such thing as supermarkets. And actually, we didn't have electricity, so everything had to be done on a wood-burning stove. And so food wasn't taken for granted, and it was always an adventure. And my mum was taught Indian cooking by the parents of the girls that she was teaching. So that was Goan cookery. And she was inspired to set up a Sunday lunch club called Leopard's Lair. And so food was very much something that we spoke about as a family and enjoyed as a family. And we cooked as a family from a very young age. So I was cooking from about the age of 5. So then eventually, I had to go back to school in the UK, and letters were always a list of things that I wanted to eat or that I couldn't eat or I'd had to eat. So that was food. It was central to my life from a very early age. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I know that you're also a resident of Italy, and we'll talk about that later. But can you tell us a little bit, what was the circumstance in which the idea for Pasta Grannies came about? Was it sitting at the desk and figure out what you wanted to do? I don't want to say when you grow up, but maybe to change your professional direction, or were you exposed to a specific event, something that kind of let that light bulb go off?
Yes, I think it was much more of a slow dawning rather than a sort of sitting down and thinking strategically about what I did next. My husband and I had bought a house in Marche, and so settling in there, I was again sort of looking at what was happening in terms of food and specialities and things like that. And I noticed that it was only older women who were making pasta by hand on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And I was very interested by that. And I thought, well, this is a special generation of women, and they're not going to be around for much longer. And someone needs to make a record of this, because this tradition, this domestic tradition, isn't continuing. Their daughters and granddaughters are going out to work. And don't have time to make pasta. I mean, they go and buy it.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Why wouldn't you?
That's, we would, in my house, I'm from Rome. My mom was a doctor, and although she cooked every single day, but there wasn't the same, she cooked fabulously, but the longer taking, those traditions took longer, like they were kept for mainly in the holidays, whereas my paternal grandmother was indeed, maybe she would have qualified for being a pasta granny, whose function was more raising the family and keep up with all those traditions. Actually, when we would go and visit her, my grandparents lived in Puglia. She had one room that was always filled of all the Christmas traditions that, my brother and I a couple of times nibbed on before it was the holiday time, and got totally busted. But as I said, you're right. So when I go back home, it's a Christmas time that maybe we'll sit down and make, strufoli or some other things. So you notice that, times are changing. And from noticing that to deciding, I want to document that, what did it take? Because this is a massive undertaking that you have put upon yourself.
Yes, I suppose if I'd known what was involved, I might have, avoided it. But it was a gradual process. So, the first granny I took photographs of rather than a video. That was fine and lovely, but actually the physicality of pasta making is such that you want to capture the rhythm of it, and how their hands work and all that kind of thing. So I picked up a video camera, not having ever picked up a video camera before, and taught myself. And nowadays I have a cameraman, so much to the relief of everybody. So that's how it got started. And so the first granny was the mother of the supermarket manager, Alessandro, or grandmother actually. And then, the next one was the granny of the photographer, and the next one was a neighbor. And so it was very slow and very gradual process of, okay, we found another lady and let's film her. And it wasn't until you sort of worked out that actually, if you want to write a book at any stage, you need to demonstrate an audience. So that meant taking YouTube slightly more seriously, because you have to post regularly to start the ball rolling and get it and increase your audience. I mean, now I have, on YouTube alone, 900,000. So but I can remember very clearly only having 63 subscribers, and one was my mum. So it was very slow beginning, and it took 3 years really to get significant numbers. So when anybody asks me about, I'd love to do something similar, I say, well, what you need is persistence. You need to love your subject, regardless of whether you're getting any money, whether you're getting any recognition. Do it for the love of your subject. And I have to say that I think I have the best job in the world.
Yes,
I just meeting lots of lovely ladies, and they all have their own stories and their own sort of particular recipe, even if it's tagliatelle again. I mean, there's always something slightly different about it. And so, yes, 2017 at Christmas, I can remember having 5,000 subscribers and thinking that would be about it.
Yeah.
And now I've got 2.5 million. So across.
Okay. And it looks like, for instance, I love the introduction of your book, and it's already earmarked because I have some favorites that I want to try. And I like when you're saying that. I wanted to talk maybe a couple of minutes about, again, maybe your intent that I was documenting these ladies, and obviously even within the grannies themselves, I would like you to talk about not only how cheerful they are, but there is indeed a lot of resilience in those ladies, because if the average age is 90 and above, that have seen and lived through some very interesting historical moments, and where maybe food was not the glamorous thing that we think of right now, but it was, how do I feed my family, or how do I feed my family on a budget? And obviously pasta is probably one of those foods also that stretches, goes along the way. But also something else that you say, however, they're not cute. Here are ladies who remember a time before antibiotics became widely available, lived through the Second World War, had to grow or forage for food before it could be eaten, were manual laborers from an early age, all while cooking for their families, and they're still smiling. They know good food. Again, as I said, instead of having, you have been exposed probably to the most authentic regional cuisine that anyone could hope to see and taste in their entire lifetime. And so your intent was, again, to document these this tradition that was getting lost, and people enjoyed the grannies. And then eventually, I think, there are some people that are seeing what is really behind this beautiful project. I wish there were a way of somehow entertaining a conversation with the Italian government to make some of these videos official, because it's a depository of history that you have captured for us.
Yes. Yes, I mean, I think it is I suppose I started out by thinking in terms of pasta, and I was very clear that it had to be women, not chefs, housewives, and I wasn't going to be, distracted by those who are earning a living from making pasta. It was a domestic tradition that is changing, that people always eat pasta, And YouTube is a great place because there's no barriers to entry. If I went to a commissioning editor and said, look, I need to make this archive of women and their pasta, they would have, and there's no jeopardy and there's no competition and there is no large knives, they would have said no. So YouTube was it, and it had to be a kind of a regular thing. And pasta is because of the diversity of pasta shapes in Italy, it's a great vehicle for of finding a way in and chatting to these women. So it started out as being purely pasta, but then it very much moved also into celebrating these women. So I always say people come for the pasta, but stay for the grannies.
Mm-hmm.
Because they are extraordinary. And it's not actually just Italian grandmothers, you know, there's that whole generation across Europe
Mm-hmm.
that had survived so much and have come from a different time, a different society. So
Mm-hmm.
pasta making for Italian women was a life skill,
Mm-hmm.
you know, more important than writing. And it, you know, and we don't want to go back there. But they, you know, they were put in the field because there were no machines,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know, as well as alongside their brothers. And, you know, we forget that the countryside was so populated in Italy. And it's only now that everybody sort of, you know, lives in suburbs and it's all quite comfortable. But, you know, 60, 70 years ago, it wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I thought, you know, celebrate them. I mean, aren't they fantastic? You know?
They are, and they have become everyone's grannies. I mean, unfortunately, some of them have already left us. For instance, Cesaria, and who doesn't remember her Lorigitas, that is no longer with us. It became, so to speak, an international day of mourning, not just the little town where they're from. And for instance, this past summer, I know personally it was before Pasta Grannies that I had already encountered these ladies, but I returned to Bari for just an overnight this past summer, and I met up with Portia again, who unfortunately had a stroke, and she can't make orecchiette. So it's one of those things that you have documented for all of us. And it was so important to us. I mean, she's still very talkative and very social, sitting outside of her house, and now her granddaughter is kind of taking over. She says that it's even better than she was. But that was that contact with the public. I mean, she was a little more public than some of the other grannies. Was so part of her soul that now not being able to execute on something that she had done for the last 60 years, it's really like taking a big piece of her. And but how long does it, you know, how long does it take you to build a rapport, maybe with the families first, to kind of be let in? I don't think, you know, or if you can elaborate a little more on the process of identifying your grannies, and how do you actually get to enter their kitchen?
Yes, I think sometimes viewers think, you know, we sort of suddenly magic them into, you know, we appear in their kitchen and that's it. In fact, it's a much more long-winded process, if you like, a more delicate negotiation. So these days I have a granny finder. She's called Livia De Giovanni. And so what she does is, first of all, make contact with people like the mayor of a town, or an organizer of a food, you know, a sagra, a food festival, and ask for recommendations. And so they will say, oh, you know, talk to X. And invariably we talk to families first. So, you know, it's about explaining what Pasta Grannies is, you know, what will be required, a couple of hours of their time, that kind of thing. So Livia will be in contact with the family and the grandmother repeated times before we actually turn up. So when, you know, Livia certainly isn't a stranger by the time that we get to their front door. So I think, you know, another development might be to actually start sending Livia in advance of us. I think, you know, if we've got the sort of time and sort of the budget to do that, we'll do more of that, just to sort of make sure that everybody's very relaxed and happy by the time we actually arrive in their kitchens, because, you know, it takes a lot of courage and a sense of adventure to invite 4 strangers into your kitchen.
Yes, because there is yourself, the cameraman, who is all included in the group.
There's Livia and me. And then there's Andrea Neri, he's Italian, he's the cameraman. And since last year, we've also had a second cameraman and lighting and audio. So it's actually improved the quality of the video by having the extra person. It means we can film later in the day, that kind of thing. So we got a little team that goes around And so, we're not like telly. We don't sort of insist on rehearsal or marking things. We just have a conversation and we work around what our grandmother is doing, the Signora is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And we might say, oh, can you do that again? Or, could you just sort of repeat that? Or, but it would be very sort of casual. It's not we want you to say this line or anything like that. So we try and make it as normal as possible. And then, of course, because they're not making it for YouTube, they're making the pasta for us. We have to sit down and eat it at the end.
So were you aware of how many different types of pasta you might even have in the same, region? I mean, they might call it in a certain way, but then you have so many different variations. Did that surprise you, or?
I used to think there was a coherence about the naming and the shapes of pasta, and now I know that there isn't.
Well, sometimes
there are so many. I mean, you can have different names for the same pasta, and the same name can be used for different pastas. I mean, it's very confusing. And, the variety is almost endless.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always good fun. And they all say, no, that's not how you say it. And that's not what you do. And it's only kind of 5 minutes down the road that they're saying something different. So,
yeah, even because, there might be for certain things, what we would refer to as the depositary recipes, the proportions for tagliatelle. But then you go into anyone's household, and obviously there's going to be a variation that might depend on the ingredients that are available in that region on that day, the family tradition that people are trying to carry over. So that's where the Italians get really argumentative of what is authentic and what is not authentic. So whatever happens in your household, that's what is authentic to you.
Well, I avoid the word authentic. There are guardians of recipes, they're associated.
I love that. Yes, guardians.
And that's great. We all need to know what they are, but I don't think home cooks get the memo. Home cooks don't get the memo because, as you're saying, it's the art of making do with what you have and making the most of it. And pasta is one of those wonderful things which, if you're going to have a ragu, it's a great way of extending that ragu. What would be, sort of like a beef burger amount of meat will kind of now feed a family of 6. So, that's one of the things about pasta is making a big meal, filling people up.
Yeah, and like especially during this time, the last 2 years that we were homebound, there was indeed an explosion of pasta making and bread making trends. And to me, there was always, I don't know, maybe it's just a personal opinion, a huge difference between a perfectly crafted pasta that a lot of times 99% was a copy of, you just had to search the internet to find the original, and the pasta that might be even imperfect but has a soul and has a tradition, has a story. And that's why the recipes, the videos, and these ladies that have a story. And so going back to the families, and then eventually we'll talk about the second book. So these ladies, maybe they were not equally known if there are small villages, everyone knows one another, but they were not famous. Some of them maybe. So what was or maybe even within their families, they were taken for granted. How did some of these experiences change that perception, whether it was within the family or externally in the town?
Yes, for some women, they're oblivious and they kind of life continues as normal. And others, their grandchildren in particular get very excited that they're on YouTube and that they're suddenly superstars and they're going to, that they're seen all over the world. And so there is that enjoyment of the recognition. We quite often have husbands in the background who are completely perplexed. Wow. There is suddenly this interest in what is an everyday task. It's like, you know, it's like coming into a British home and saying, "Oh, let me show me how you make baked beans." So yes, it's and some of our ladies actually enjoy it so much that they want to do it again. So we have several women who are what I call my star grannies, because they sort of they've appeared 3 or 4 times. And really enjoy the experience. And one of our grandmothers, Giovanna, actually, she's an Italian American, and she's got her own YouTube channel.
Oh, okay.
and another Nonna Dora, whose son has a restaurant, in New York, and she has her own pasta line. So particularly, I think if you come over to America, you become much more entrepreneurial and do things as a consequence.
Actually, I was going to ask you a couple of things, but some of the is there any pasta shape that was very unusual for you, and it was totally a mesmerizing experience? I have one that I'm still trying at, but I would like to ask you if there is any type of pasta, or maybe the story behind it, that really touched you or surprised you.
So the most recent one, Sardinia is a great source of unusual pastas. And so the most recent one from Sardinia that we looked at was one called Andorinos.
Oh, yes.
Which I tried making, and it's completely impossible.
Yes, were they making it
kind of spiral, but you turn it on itself. So there isn't a sort of a hole in the center. It's a kind of solid center. So it looks like a screw.
Yes.
And it's very tricky to make.
Not only that, it's also, and I don't know how it was, I don't recall, but it's usually made on a piece of glass if they have it, the Andorinos. And that piece of glass was coming from refrigerators.
That's right.
It was the one of the shelves, the bottom shelf, the refrigerator. So when I was there, I was actually in Sardinia this past summer, and I was meeting with a pasta wheel artisan, and he had the whole shelf, and he said, you know how you're sitting on gold right now. Or he had also the pasta wheels where the dial, the wheel, was an old coin from when we still had the kingdom. So all these, and then in Sardinia, you mentioned these, a few times during the videos that were shot in Sardinia. The ladies use these wooden pasta machines. I don't know how to call
kneading machines.
Kneading machine, yes.
Oh, I don't know. Yes. I think I don't know. Perhaps you know more than I do. The history behind them. It's for bread primarily, but it's for, because durum wheat and durum wheat flour, semolina, is such a hard thing to knead in big quantities, and because they are making bread in big quantities, this paddle beats it up and does the hard work for them. And so, we find a lot of homes have these special machines, these there's a kind of broad paddle that goes round and round and kind of, I say it beats it up, it kind of whacks it.
It's fascinating. I've not seen any of them, and I'm always very intrigued to go to museums that have either costumes or tools of the trade, but I've not encountered. So your videos are very inspirational. It's going to be for my next quest the next time I go back. My one pasta type that I'm totally enamored with and so hard to make is the suffilindeo, the strength. That's I
think it's made really not to be eaten, but as a sort of religious offering, because let's face it, tagliolini is much quicker and tastes the same. So it's about, that whole thing of making a pilgrimage with a special pasta and stuff, and that's why there's only a few women who make it. And suffilindeo is another one of those. You stretch it into strands, for those who don't know, and then dry it in layers at different angles across a flat basket disc, and then leave it for a couple of days. And then having done that, you break it up.
Yes, all of that.
I mean, it's like, you should just leave it as a sculpture. And it's so beautiful, but no, you have to break it up and then cook it in mutton stock.
Yes, and so it's the same thing that there is a type of pasta from Calabria, who is from the Arborish, the Albanian community, and it starts with you make your dough and then you create a hole so it looks like a donut, but then you work it like you roll it, and then the circle gets bigger and bigger, and then you wrap it against your hands, always trying to maintain the elasticity, and then all of a sudden the once you are thin enough but not as thin as the souffle dough, then you're ripping it apart.
And
it's
so I mean, there are various names. There's Doors is one name. Strilia is one of the others. It's got several names in different communities, that kind of bicycle hoop that you then make into strands. And in fact, the easiest name is Stringozzi, and that's actually in book 2.
So now, how much time do you spend in Italy? You get to spend in Italy?
I mean, until the pandemic, I tried to get out there every 3 weeks or so. I'm an Italian resident, so I'm sempre in giro. I have a husband who works full time in London, so I need to see him. So, I come back occasionally to see, and I've got a mum who's 90, so there's kind of a split responsibility between Italy and London. So I spend as much time as possible in Italy.
Wonderful. So I'm sure everyone it's like, why don't you talk about the books yet? Absolutely would love to talk about the books. I would like to talk about the second one that I'm so jealous. No one can touch it. It's like, that's my copy. You pre-order yours, okay? Yeah. So this Pasta Grannies is comfort cooking. So tell us a little bit about what people will expect to find, and yes, you go ahead and tell us all about it.
Okay. So it's called comfort cooking because a response to the pandemic, because through the pandemic I had so many people write and tell me that Pasta Grannies was helping them cope with the stresses and anxiety of the pandemic. So I thought, well, the recipes that have gone into book 2 are less about all the different pasta shapes that you can find in Italy. It's about those recipes which are crowd pleasing, family pleasing. There are 1 or 2 that are more ambitious to make, but by and large, they're easy to make and guaranteed to please people that you're making it for. So, for example, everybody loves lasagna, and there are 4 lasagna recipes in there. There are also pizza recipes, risotto, because risotto is, pasta isn't the only carbohydrate in northern Italy, and also arancini from Sicily, and a couple of puddings like bunette, and there's a slightly more variety than the first book in terms of.
And also you spend a few pages talking about the tools, how to make pasta by hand.
Because everybody writes in and says, I want a board. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, you've got to make sure that you're going to use a large board. Don't go out there and get a huge board and then because you've got a problem of where you're going to put it. It's going to hide behind the sideboard. So we talk about how to make one, because I'm regularly asked that. What do I do about you only need a really long mattarello, a rolling pin, if you're actually going to make the egg sfoglia and you want to sort of make great big ones. And I say, if you're not sure about that, then use some doweling, a doweling rod or a broom handle. They won't be ideal, because what you really want is something that won't warp. You need a completely straight tool, because then you'll get an even thickness to your sfoglia.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, for the time being, have a go with cheaper things that
Mm-hmm.
you can make do with before you make the investment of, you know, converting a table, for example.
Yeah, because even, you know, some of the tools that maybe, I don't know if they're still being used, but people look around about and they look at what they had around the house that would do the job. Like, for instance, when you make any type of pasta alla ferretto, now you have the fancy ferretto, but before you took I don't know how you call it, that metal rod from an umbrella, and that was it, that did the job.
I know. I mean, I don't know if I believe that story.
Mm-hmm.
That's a heresy to say, because it doesn't rain that often in Italy. Maybe that's why you can afford to take the wire from the umbrella. But I mean, you know, grass, you know, the long sort of pampas-like grass stalks are a very popular way of, you know, you strip off sort of the grass head and any of the outside sort of leaves, and you're left with a very serviceable bit of rod, you know, as a grass stalk that you can make your macaroncini with.
Then the pictures are amazing, and I don't know if I can show it, but in addition to the beautiful pasta that just makes you want to eat it, you're showing us also the lady in this case with picking up her own. You know, I think these pictures also.
It's wonderful.
Fantastic. Were you together, or was it provided by the family of her picking up the mushrooms?
Chichi. So that recipe is Chichi lives in Liguria, in the mountains behind Genova. So for that particular photo, we took the photographer Lizzie Mason back to Chichi, and so she went through the recipe again for her. Chichi has a slight problem with her shoulder, so she uses a gadget, pasta machine, to make her tagliolini. So that's, I mean, then Chichi is another example of making do with what you have. So she uses nettle in her, you know, cooked nettles, chopped, strained, and swaps an egg out for some nettle. And you could use spinach as well. It's whatever you have, and that's what makes her pasta so lovely and green. And you know, she lives in the middle of these wonderful chestnut woodlands, so she gets a lot of porcini, a lot of wild mushrooms around her. So that's her autumn dish, is this wonderful porcini sauce.
And I was also in Piemonte for actually my first time. Usually every time I go back home, I try, you know, in addition to be kind of kidnapped by the family for an extended period of time, I try to carve in some time where I would be doing one trip with my husband, and then the other one, it's a solo trip. And so this summer, I was actually visiting Piedmont, not once, but twice. So now here it is, the chocolate bonnet right there for me to try. And so obviously, you know, this there are companion books, one of those that you just don't want to put them down. Again, it's different from any, I feel that I have an extended family, or just, as I said, one of those books I'm totally pulled in, because there is much more. And in addition to enhance some of my, you know, cooking skills, and just kind of add the story and see where. So how is Vicky in the kitchen?
I'm a good cook. So I've always been a good cook. I'm not a chef.
Well, so, you said it from a very early age. You had.
So I do make pasta. I like your mum and probably you. I don't you know, one of the things I enjoy doing is actually trying out different flours. I like to have a kind of nutty taste to my pasta. One of the things the women often say to me is that flour has changed in their lifetime, and that in the beginning, you know, when they were young, it smelt of grasses and hay and lovely and sweet and nutty, and now it smells of nothing. So I think the way around that is, if you can't find your local miller, your local flour mill, then I think it is to sort of experiment with other flours like farro, Emma in America.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I had another question. It just escaped to me. So yeah, it's probably yes. It finally came back. So you probably also, because of this beautiful project, have had the ability and privilege to visit some of the manufacturers. I mean, you can see where some of the foods or the pasta brands are made. Yes. Can you tell us any of those experiences?
Yeah, so one that's local to me, and there are several very good. I want to stress that there's this, in talking about Pasta Mancini, it's not the only good pasta manufacturer in Italy, but it's one that's local to me. And they take their pasta very seriously. They grow their own wheat to make their pasta. So and they say that a good packet of pasta, if you open the packet, you should be able to smell the wheat. So that's what they aim for with their pasta. So it's still a family operation. And it's beautiful. It looks like a winery because it's so modern, and you know, all these different, they have different days for different shapes, because you have, you know, different dyes that you use, these bronze extruders that have to be swapped. So they'll have a kind of a spaghetti day and a fusilli day and things like that. So they are, you know, a great example of you know, I mean, you get in Italy, in Regnano and Abruzzo, there are some outstanding producers.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about, you're now in the US. If you can share a little bit, I'm sure, you know, making sure that everyone is, you know, fully familiar with the second book and the stories and the project behind it. Where will you be hopping?
Well, I'm coming to the end of, as we speak, I've got another 2 days in America. So I'm currently in the Bay Area. I'm going down to Los Angeles for the last 2 days. So I don't know when this goes out, but I'm at Italy tomorrow. But then Ellen, and now serving LA. I've got a lovely evening coming up with Chris Bianco and Courtney Storer. So they're providing the food, and they're going to be chatting. There's going to be a panel discussion, which I'm very excited about. It's like, ooh. And so that's got lots of people. That's sold out, in fact, I think. You can check out. But so there is I've had some great fun. I mean, you know, there's Rockridge Market Hall here in Oakland, and there's Omnivore Books in San Francisco itself. I love these independent bookshops. I mean, and there's Book Larder up in Seattle as well. I mean, they do such fantastic things for their community and for their readers. So I'm always very happy to come along to them, which is what I've done.
Yes. And so anything else that you would like to add regarding the books or the experience or anything? Because I asked you a lot of questions, but there may be maybe something that didn't come out that you would like to share.
So I think in this book, there's a QR code for every recipe. So that will take you back to the YouTube video and the nonna, the signora, making that particular recipe. So you can sit with the words, you can enjoy them, but you can also, you know, watch the video again for inspiration if you want by scanning the QR code. I'll take you straight there on your mobile.
Wonderful. Are you going to spend the holidays? If I can ask you, where are you going to spend the Christmas holidays? If
well, actually,
celebrate.
Usually it's Italy. Usually we spend Christmas, and so holidays for the British start later than for Americans. You guys are you're already kind of cranking up with Thanksgiving and stuff, but it hasn't caught on over in the UK and Italy yet. So actually we've got a pandemic delayed holiday that we're going to be taking over Christmas. So not Italy this year, alas, because I love it. I love that kind of New Year with all the fireworks and things. It's a great place to be for the holidays.
Yeah. Indeed. So Vicky, I cannot thank you enough for giving us this beautiful hour and learning a lot about, this commitment, because it's a huge, as you said, perseverant passion. And we just can't get enough of what you bring to us. And we just want you to keep on doing it.
I have no intention of giving up. I'll be doing it forevermore.
We will be here. So again, thank you again. And as I said in the introduction, we could not have had a better representative of someone that has been exposed to so many different facets of the Italian food and the recipe keepers. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you very much indeed for inviting me.
So now it is time to say goodbye. Arrivederci e alla prossima. If you would like to catch up this episode again, or you can always tune in on our YouTube channel and catch up on any previous material. You can sign up also to our newsletter by sending us an email at the italianradiohour@gmail.com. Alla prossima e ciao ciao!
Ciao, alla prossima.